Are you an entrepreneur or ready to become a boss? Welcome to Hawaii Boss, the business podcast made in Hawaii, where you will hear from island movers and shakers on who they are and their impact on our state. And now, step into the office of your host for Hawaii Boss, David Pettijohn.
Okay. And we are live. Aloha Friday, our Hawaii Boss crew, gang. We are out here, as you can see, on the pristine Waikiki beach here. And but this is where I'm at physically, but today we're reaching out all the way across the mainland to the East Coast, New York City, to meet with our
Hawaii.
to meet with our friend Patrice Tanaka, who is the Chief Joy Officer, and we'll talk about that a little bit. What is that? At Joyful Planet LLC. She's the founder of this this company and this organization that is redefining joy in the workplace. And Patrice, aloha and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be talking with someone from Hawaii.
Well, it's wonderful of you to do that, because I'm in Hawaii. You're all the way in New York, and but this connection to Hawaii. How are you? How do you do this? What's your connection to Hawaii?
Well, I was born and raised in Hawaii. I'm a product of Hawaii. Grew up on the windward side in Kaneohe. Graduated from Castle High, the University of Hawaii. And when I was in my early 20s, I moved to New York City, and I've been living here ever since. In fact, I've lived in New York City longer than I lived in Hawaii. But when I was a young girl, my goal was to live in New York City. And that's because I grew up in all those old black and white movies from the 30s and 40s. And my favorite films were like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. And she always seemed to be dancing with Fred Astaire in some swank Manhattan supper club, dressed in a long flowy evening gown and dancing cheek to cheek. And and I thought, well, if I could get myself to New York City, then that could be my life, right? I could live in a white Art Deco penthouse apartment and talk on a white telephone and drink cocktails and go dancing at swank supper clubs every night. So
you were a romantic when you were younger.
Yes. And I looked around in Hawaii when I was 7 and 8, and that was not what Hawaii was. No. And so I was a really annoyed young girl, because I thought I was born in the wrong place and time, and that I should have been living in Manhattan, but specifically Manhattan of the 1930s and 40s.
Sure. So you're frustrated, you're angry, but sometimes that's a motivation. Sometimes you're like, I don't like the current circumstance. I mean, that's what we're going to talk about, sort of why we get on the Hawaii Boss. Is like when we don't feel like something's right in our lives, sometimes that motivates us. We're not in the place we're supposed to be. We don't even know what that means behind the scenes. We have this feeling, this something that's pushing us or driving us. And so when did you find out first? I mean, was it just this vision of the the white phone and just that whole thing, and it captured your whole emotion and person?
It did. As a young child, you see these visions, whether it's on television, film, and you think, oh my God, I didn't realize there was life that looked like that somewhere else, not here. So I need to go there. So anyway, we're very impressionable when we're younger, and a lot of times we put away our childish dreams, and we just, try to live a normal life. That never happened to me. I was always trying to get to New York City, and I knew that I would, and I did get here in my early 20s.
Well, that's awesome. And we see that too. People, from Hawaii, oftentimes want to, I don't know if you call it escape, kind of get off and try something else, something different. But then they always want to come home.
Polar opposite, right? I would say New York is the polar opposite of Hawaii, where you're still living in the United States and speaking English and, being an American, but it is the polar opposite experience. And actually, now in my older years, I really appreciate the value of both, Hawaii and New York City. And, I'm glad that I have both.
Well, each has its own sort of values, right? And you're fortunate that you're able to experience both of them. But but we'll talk about that a little bit later, sort of, how things are going currently with you. But let's continue to stay back there as far as, you got motivated. What did you study in school? What was your,
Well, I majored in English when I started the University of Hawaii. And then I realized quickly, what am I going to do with this degree once I graduate? Because I don't want to be an English teacher, nor did I feel equipped to write the great American novel. So I figured, let me think of a practical application for this. And so then I decided, well, maybe journalism, because Watergate was, at its height. And so I took a journalism class, fell in love, switched my major to journalism with a minor in English. And then I got myself a job working part-time. Actually, I created the job for myself. There were 2 Japanese English newspapers, daily newspapers at the time. I'm sure they don't exist today. The Hawaii Hochi and the Hawaii Herald. So I pitched myself to the editor that I could interview local Japanese American influential figures, whether they were politicians or business people or artists. And I do a feature for them that they could run on the front page in English, because the front page was in English. So I did that for a year for, I think it was the Hochi, and then the Herald, their competitor, offered me more money to do the same thing for them. So I switched to the other paper and did that. This is while I was going to college. I just needed to prove to myself that the journalism thing was what I wanted to do. So
right. So you experimented with it and said, okay, this is a journalist type role here. Let's see if I can max this out.
Yeah. And basically, I just wanted to meet some of these people to kind of get a sense of who they are and how they got to where they are, and, be able to meet them. That's why I created that opportunity.
Right. So you got charged up, and so you graduate and you're like, I'm going to Manhattan, I'm out of here. I'm going. It was that easy? You just
Well, actually, pretty much on my last day at the University of Hawaii, I was walking across campus, and Bob Scott, who at the time was the chair of the journalism department, asked me if I had a job lined up. And I said no, because I was thinking of taking the summer off and then looking for a job in the fall. But he said, oh, okay, well, call Ella Chun at Hawaii Press Newspapers, because she's looking for someone. And I was thinking, oh no, I don't want to work during the summer. I went to meet Ella. We hit it off. She offered me the job. And then the next day or 2 days later, she called me so upset because her publisher had offered the job to someone who worked there the year before as an intern, and now they were offering her the job. So Ella called to apologize, and I said, oh, no problem, don't worry about it, because actually I was relieved because I wanted to take the summer off.
But that you showed listen. Today, though, some people wouldn't. They say, "Hey, I already have my summer plan. I'm not going to go check out that opportunity."
No.
Right.
I didn't want to blow off the chair of the journalism department.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, so I didn't get the job for the summer, but Ella called me in September and said, "I have another job opening, and you were so gracious when." I had to rescind the job offer. So would you be interested? I said, yes, I would be. And it was the Neighbor Island editor for Hawaii Press Newspapers. And one of the reasons I'm here is because I went to do a story on the Wailea Resort. It had just opened, and it's a world-class, beautiful resort.
Right.
And so I went there, and the PR director took me on a flight seeing tour of the property because it was so expansive, right? And then she took me on a flight seeing tour of the entire island of Maui. Wow. And they actually had 2 helicopters on property just for that purpose, right? They had everything there. And so I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's a great job. I wish I had her job. Right. Now, I'm somebody who never says stuff like that, right? That's why I remembered it, that I thought it was such a cool job that I wish I had her job. So a year later, somebody called me, the head of Pan Am PR had recommended me for a job at the Intercontinental Maui, which is a resort in Wailea at the time. And they wanted me to be the PR director there. And I was like, PR, I didn't even know what that meant. And
Right.
I figured, well, I get press releases from those people. Yeah, I can write those press releases. I can do
Easy.
that
Yeah, yeah,
PR
yeah,
job.
yeah, yeah.
And so, so I said yes, because I figured, okay, I'll learn this PR thing. And then when I finally moved to New York City, I could either find gainful employment as a PR person or as a journalist.
Journalist.
So
Yeah,
that
you
was
had
my,
options. So you cooked up
yeah,
some options for yourself. That's
right,
how we
right.
have to do. If you have this vision out there of where you're trying to
Yes.
go, and
Yes.
then you don't know, you start laying tracks,
Yeah.
towards that, but you have to,
Yeah.
and it may take longer, like you said, a year later, after working,
Right.
working, this other opportunity came up. It
Yeah,
doesn't
but
just happen.
Exactly. And here's what happened. I remember saying to myself, well, I don't want to get stuck on Maui because my goal is to get to New York City. So I'm going to stay here no more than 2 years. So I worked at the property, and finally I was trying to get a job in New York from Maui, and one headhunter from New York said, Patrice, you have to quit your job on Maui, move to New York, and then find a job. Nobody is going to bother with an entry-level person that needs to be relocated to New York to offer them an entry-level job. That made a lot of sense. So I decided, okay, I'm going to save some more money, and then I'm going to quit. And
didn't that scare you at first, though? Like having to make a big jump like that? I mean,
no,
quitting your job, and some people just get so afraid, like there's no way I'm going to be able to do that.
But that's because they didn't grow up on those Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire films. I knew that I need to get myself to New York.
That's right. That vision just kept pulling you. Okay.
Yeah. And so when I quit my job at the Intercontinental, I was filling out all these papers, and I saw, oh, I'm leaving 2 years to the day that I started that job. And I had forgotten then that I said, I'm only going to stay 2 years.
Right.
I just thought that was a coincidence.
Uh-huh.
But when you have a goal and you have a deadline for achieving it,
right,
you're that much farther ahead in making it happen. Okay, so I'm a big believer in that. And you work towards it consciously and unconsciously or subconsciously. And that's kind of been the story of my whole life. I have a dream. I know what I want to do, when I want to do it. And then, everything conspires, including myself, to work towards that goal or that dream.
Absolutely. But so you get to New York.
Right.
And listen, 80s, 90s, New York City.
79. Yeah.
Okay.
September or October. Right.
So this whole, that's, SNL is in its, prime, there's, was it Mad Men over there? PR, is it, New York City, Manhattan, you got this, we have these ideas. What is it really going on over there?
Yeah, well, I got here in 79, and here's another thing where I knew that everything was going to be fine because I always wanted to live here, even though I had no job, no apartment, no money, no friends. I had a little bit of money, but my greatest concern was that I was going to get a job too soon after I moved to New York City. So I actually set a goal to not be working until 6 weeks after I arrived, because I had a lot of work to do to kind of get acclimated. So 6 weeks to the day, I start working at this small 4-person PR agency where the woman entrepreneur who headed it was, I realized quickly, probably one of the worst bosses in New York City. So within 3 months, 3 people left. All of a sudden, I'm the second most senior person after her. And because we were so different, she only liked to sell new business, and I only liked to service clients because we said we would do a great job for them.
Right.
So we actually work together well. And
you stay in your lane, I'll stay in my lane. And I think between the two of us, we might be able to pull this off, because that's your skill set over there and that's your skill set over there.
Exactly. And so I helped her to grow the business. So within 7 years, we were acquired by Chiat Day, which was and still is a hot creative ad agency. They had clients like Apple Computers and Nissan, Energizer. Yeah. So we were part of Chiat Day for 3 years, I think.
That's exciting. Getting these big name clients and things, and working, rubbing elbows with, all these, big money,
And to your point, you just said something about, was it like the Mad Men era? And that was really in the 50s, Mad Men. But what it did remind me of, when we were part of Chiat Day, and when I led a group of colleagues in a management buyback to start my own PR agency called PT and Company, is at the time, I don't know if you remember the TV series LA Law and 30 something. They were both on the air at the same time. And both of those shows reminded me of how we were working together, at the advertising agency, and how we started up our new, independent PR agency a few years later. And in fact, it was so funny because one of the creative directors or account directors at Chiat Day was actually serving as a creative consultant for 30 something, because it was about two Philadelphians working at a big ad agency in Philadelphia, and their colleagues who later went on to start their own small independent ad agency. But there were stories that happened on 30 something that were kind of ripped off from what actually happened at our agency with certain clients. And it was like, wait a second, didn't that just happen? And
they have a disclaimer at the bottom that says, none of these events are actually related to anything.
Nothing like real life to borrow from. So that's what I think about when I think of those days of Chiat Day, and then starting PT and Company in 1990.
Well, we all have our careers where we set our goals, and we feel like this is where we're becoming our full self, in our career. However, there's things that we feel as we get older, maybe that there's some things that are still missing in our work life, our love, work and play sort of balance. Things are off. We're not complete yet, and we still feel that, but we don't have still the same vision, like the romantic vision when we were young. We're like, what is it though? We don't even see it yet. So how did you come to this realization that, something is missing and I need something else?
Yeah, well, I went to see an executive coach after I had been building my first agency with 12 partners. It was an employee-owned agency, and we were very successful. In fact, within the 8 years, we were named the #1 most creative PR agency in the whole country, and the #2 best place to work among all PR agencies in the country. So we were nationally known, even though we were still considered a boutique PR agency.
Yes, I would have to list all of your awards in like a separate show over here. That's why we didn't even talk about it.
No. But I was just burnt out after 12 years of doing that. So I went to see an executive coach for help, and she said, yes, I can help you, but first I need you to rethink your purpose in life. Now, when I heard that, I was really annoyed at her, because I just finished telling her I could barely get out of bed. I was so depressed. And she said, I hear you, but I really need you to find the energy to do this, because if you can tell me what your life purpose is, I can help you live that purpose and feel a lot better. So over the next 2 weeks, I brainstormed with myself to think about what my life purpose could be. And basically, I was thinking about my life at the time was pretty miserable, or I was miserable, just because of so many things that had happened. And again, this was 5 months after 9/11. So everyone was major reeling from
trauma response happening, shock. Everyone's still in shock and
shock and horror. And I was exhausted from building my first agency for 12 years and caring for a husband who had been battling a brain tumor for 16 years by that point. So I was just totally burnt out. And so basically, in trying to come up with what my life purpose was, I was thinking, okay, my life today, I would characterize as unjoy, not joyful. The life that I want going forward is a more joy-filled life. So how do I get from here to here? So to go from unjoy to joy. So then I decided I'm going to write myself a very prescriptive life purpose statement that said, my purpose in life is to choose joy every day, to be mindful of that joy, and to share that joy with others. So it was a 3-part purpose: choose joy, be mindful of it, and share it with others. And I felt that by living this purpose every single day, I could get myself to a place of more joy. So that's
sort of that
how
same vision you had of when, you know, of the New York and the experience and the wonderful, you can have the same sort of ideals and things wrapped around this idea of joy. So that pulls you out of or into another direction. It's another light for you to sort of grow towards.
Yeah, I think that if you can succinctly state what it is that is, you know, your purpose, you have a better chance of using that and actively living that purpose to accomplish, you know, what matters most to you. Now, this is on the heels of, for my first agency, I actually articulated what today would be called a business purpose for our agency, because we were a no-name startup agency starting during a recession and having to compete with every other agency, established agency in New York City and every other agency across the country. So I felt we needed to distinguish ourselves from every other agency, but we didn't really have a lot of resources to do this. So I thought that the most efficient way would probably be just to articulate a succinct statement of who we were as an agency, what we were committed to doing, and how we serve the community at large. Now, today, that would be called a business purpose. And the way we articulated it was PT and Company is committed to creating great work, a great workplace, and great communities that work. And by that, I meant healthy, sustainable communities. And by focusing and driving against that stated purpose, that's how we were able to achieve that #1 most creative agency in 8 years kind of thing.
So it works for individuals. It also works for
organizations, right.
But you have to have that sort of clarity of statement and purpose.
Yes.
Because that's the driving sort of purpose. You know, you can articulate, here's your task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 today, but that doesn't really motivate you to get up out of bed in the morning and bring you to work and things, right?
Yeah, because think about it, at work, we always articulate our goals and objectives before we start any assignment, right? Otherwise, we won't know what success looks like once we've achieved it, right? We really have to do that. But in our personal lives, people don't do that at all. And if you don't do that, you're just kind of going down any path that seems reasonable to you.
Right.
And it, you know,
sort of rudderless. It's almost like without a rudder. You're just kind of like floating through existence, reacting to the world rather than being an actor on the stage, right?
Right. It's a much less efficient way to achieve what matters most to you as an individual or an organization. So I'm all about efficiency.
Right. Well, and yeah, you have to delineate your vision and your goals. And I think that's an important, you know, leadership aspect for any business who's trying to start and things. So tell us how you know, sort of now apply that today. You've created this vision and now this new company. And so how does that extend now into your real world and your present world?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, after I think 35 plus years in PR and marketing and co-founding 3 agencies, I decided I wanted to do something different, not PR or marketing. So I look back over my life, you know, it's like, what did I do that was most exciting, that produced the most for me? And I realized, my God, the 2 most important things I ever did for myself was to, 1, articulate the business purpose of our agency, and 2, to articulate my own individual life purpose, which gave me the idea, what if I focus my new consultancy on purpose, life purpose, and organizational purpose? And the name of my consultancy, Joyful Planet, is actually my vision for the planet as well. And my vision is 7.7 billion people living their life purpose and leveraging their talents, their expertise, and their passion in service of other people and our planet. And that's how together we can create a more joyful planet. So that's what I do. I work with individuals and organizations to help them for individuals discover and actively live their purpose, and for organizations to discover and operationalize their purpose to increase, productivity, performance, and profitability.
Sure. And so there's all these companies coming out of the pandemic and trying to reset and some different things, and also these young people trying to come out and trying to find their way. Any sort of words of wisdom that says, how does it look for us in the next year, next 5 years?
Yeah, well, thank you. Actually, the past year of the pandemic, despite the pandemic and, racial injustice and insurrection and and anti-Asian hate, which, we Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders experience here on the mainland. Despite all of that, this past year has been my most productive and joyful year, because all I did was I continued to actively live my purpose. And so I made different choices during this past year than I normally would in a non-pandemic year.
Right.
But the thing that I continue to do, and I have been doing now for 20 something years, 21 years, I think, is just actively living my purpose. So my biggest advice to anyone at whatever age you are is to discover and articulate your purpose so that you can begin to actively live it. Because if you don't have clarity about your purpose, it's hard to actively live it. Okay.
Right.
You can, and
I noticed one thing that you said in the past, though,
Yeah.
as if you can't find that purpose and you're not quite sure what to do, is I think you quoted someone saying just to go out and serve someone.
Yes, I think, well, that's ultimately what a life purpose is, how you're leveraging your talents, your expertise, and your passion in service of other people and our planet, right? So if you're doing that, I think that it puts you in the mindset of, yes, when I serve other people, it brings me a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction and joy. So I want to keep doing more of it. And maybe there are issues and causes that you really care about. So maybe your service is in those specific areas, right?
Right, like yours. You're a ballroom dancer, or you wanted to dance, and so then you picked up dancing at 50, and then you also, all these other things that you're engaged in, serving with the Girl Scouts. And
that wasn't all of the work that I do, and I serve on 3 nonprofit boards and do a lot of other work apart from that. Again, this is me living my life purpose, right? And yes, I took up ballroom dancing, and that I would characterize as my first choice of joy. As soon as I shared with my executive coach that my purpose was to choose joy, be mindful of that joy, and share that joy with others, she asked me the natural follow-up question, right? So what brings you joy? And I was like, I don't know, because
there's more of this. I have to do more.
Yeah, my life at the moment is not joyful. And so she says, okay, think of something that has brought you joy in the past. So I blurted out, well, I love to dance. And so that's how I got into, she actually gave me a homework assignment when she discovered how much I love Ginger Rogers and why I was actually living in New York City because of my dream to dance like Ginger Rogers. My homework assignment was to book myself a dance lesson before our next coaching session. So that's how I got into ballroom dancing. And it did unleash a lot of joy in my life, but it was really the first step of me choosing joy, because a lot of times people don't know that they actually have to choose it in order to start experiencing that joy. They
don't realize maybe they're choosing something else. They're choosing to not go and do the thing that they love to do because of whatever they, I can't do that. There's still that limit, but something inside says, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And so you're fighting yourself until you say, yes, I can.
Right. So that's what got me started. But because I created so much joy and energy And I became very efficient at managing my life so that I could accommodate ballroom dancing and competing and writing a book, which I eventually did, on the lessons I learned from ballroom dancing. And that book is Becoming Ginger Rogers, How
That's
Ballroom Dancing Made Me a Happier Woman, a Better Partner, and a Smarter CEO. So that whole process and all the lessons I learned actually helped me to grow my business, because I understood the importance of close partnering, and that, and and the important role of leader and follower. They're both equally important roles. One is not more important than the other. And in ballroom dancing, you can only win if the leader and the follower are equally strong and talented. Okay, so if you take that approach beyond the ballroom floor, I realized, well, the way we could grow our agency is maybe to sell to another agency, like-minded agency, build a combined new agency that has greater capabilities to grow and provide opportunities for our employees. So that's what I did. And one of my colleagues said, if you hadn't taken ballroom dancing, you never could have sold our agency and not been the CEO. But you realize that, you didn't have to be the CEO to have a winning,
to make the win, right? You got
right.
what you needed by making this marriage of the
right.
agencies, right? That was your role.
Right,
You
right.
have to be the head, DIC
Yeah.
or whatever,
I could be co-chair and chief creative officer, which is my strength, and that's how I could support the new entity. So a lot of good lessons from ballroom dancing, and because of the time that I had in my life, the energy that I had, I started getting involved in organizations that were very meaningful to me, like the Girl Scouts, because I believe that we need to achieve gender equity, and Girl Scouts, which is all about leadership development for girls, is our biggest pipeline for our next generation women leaders.
Yeah, women and young men. We got to have for them to try and fit into this crazy, post-pandemic world or whatever. Even the millennials right now trying to figure out, gosh, where's my place and how do they need, hopefully, have we given them enough? As far as, like you said, those fundamental things that they need when they're young people,
Yeah, and I am on the board of Dancing Classrooms, which actually uses the vehicle of ballroom dance and social dance.
Was there a documentary on that? Was there a documentary that went over that? Okay, we love that. Our kids and everybody watched that, and it was seeing those young kids out there,
my God,
doing
yes. It's called Mad Hot Ballroom, and it's one of the most popular documentaries of all time. And it was inspired by Dancing Classrooms, a program that the nonprofit that I'm on the board of. It's a great documentary, and it really, the program, it uses the vehicle of ballroom dance to unleash social, emotional, and cognitive learning in children.
Sure, awesome,
beautiful thing. Yeah.
And boy, all of us have been stunted the last year in several ways, especially our children not being able to gather and not being able to, by Zoom. This is a sort of a new way. And so they've developed some new transactional exchange that they've all learned through, now through the video, but still they've missed some of these, our kids used to go to dances and school dances, and now they've missed all of this this human interaction. I'm curious how it's going to look in about a year or two when we all kind of get back together, if the kids are going to stand in the corner over here and the other kids in this corner. And
our program has kept kids dancing. We actually have virtual dance at home dancing classrooms.
Oh, great.
And we are now going to be able to, right now we have hybrid programs where there's some live dancing and there's virtual, and and soon we'll go to all live. I mean, but we can
once the schools open back up and everybody will be out there going at it again.
Yeah, very soon in New York, actually. I think July 6th or something like that.
Patrice, that's exciting. You've done a lot of great things. I have some special interest about your work in South Africa because my son's down in Durban right now as a missionary. He's down there for another 8 months. He's been there about a year. He had to leave, went down there first in the pandemic, he had to leave, and now he's back down there just loving the people and things. And what kind of work are you doing down there?
one of our clients at my former agency was South African tourism. So I met a woman who was trying to fundraise for this Pelo Pepa Train of Hope. And it's a wonderful program, 2 18-car trains that travel throughout South Africa, delivering primary healthcare services to very remote regions that are inaccessible except by train. So the train goes into a town and it stays there for 2 weeks, you know, doing all the work that it does. And so it visits every town, you know, a couple times a year. There are 2 trains, and a third train was supposed to come on board, a surgical train, because for want of simple cataract surgery, people are going blind, right? So the train will be performing cataract surgery. So anyway, so I've served on the board for, I don't know, 14 years for that nonprofit. And Desmond Tutu is the honorary patron for the Pelo Pepa Train of Hope.
Yes, I saw, you know, just again, finding this passion, this art, and stating it has unleashed all of this for you. I hope it can unleash this for all of our Hawaii Boss podcast listeners. I wish we had more time. I hope as things continue to progress for you, that you can come back and tell us more about what's happening in New York, or when you come back to visit. How often do you come back and get to Hawaii?
Yeah, well, I haven't been back since November 19th, 2019, pre-pandemic, but I usually get back 2 or 3 times a year because my family is there and I need to come home, you know, because I need my fix of Hawaii.
Right.
Sure.
Or the safe travels is shrinking down here. So in about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, they won't have to do any testing or pre-testing or showing your vaccine or anything.
Yeah. So I will be home soon, and I would love to work with more local companies in Hawaii who are interested in being purpose-driven organizations. And, you know, I can help companies discover and articulate their business purpose, as well as rewrite their whole vision, purpose, mission, and values.
And I think people are needing that after this. They're not quite sure. Some people have really dug in, but some people are still like, what am I now that I'm post-pandemic, or I can't do the same things I used to do? Am I the same? You know, what is my business now? What do I do?
Yes, I know. And they could help their employees, because I can work with their employees to help them discover their individual life purpose, and then challenge them to find the alignment between their individual purpose and the organization's purpose to create greater engagement to drive the business forward. And in fact, McKinsey has been doing a lot of research just this past year on the intersection of individual purpose and organizational purpose, because they know that's where the greatest unlock could be, you know, you know, having,
and we
employees.
And the millennial purpose is so different from sort of their Gen X and their sort of their predecessors, you know, that purpose. So we have to understand what, you know, how it affects them, what brings them their passion and joy.
Yes, yes. Right. And you want to unleash that passion through the vehicle of the company to help drive the company forward, right?
Right. And there's the same old hierarchical methods, like, you know, top down, heavy stuff like that doesn't fly anymore with folks. They don't stick around for that.
And in fact, the only executive, the only CEO in corporate America who's actually talking about, you know, inviting and encouraging their employees to live their life purpose through the vehicle of the company is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. He wants every employee to live their purpose through the vehicle of Microsoft, so they can say, I don't work for Microsoft. Microsoft works for me, which of course is a much stronger position to be in as an employer, right? And it's much harder to hire an employee like that away to another company who's not inviting their employees to live their purpose through the vehicle of the company, right?
Well, and if you can affect that kind of change with that large of a company, you know, you're doing something right. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Patrice, I would also invite all the folks listening today to go to joyfulplanet.com and find out everything that's going on with you and your history, and also your current, some of your books, you know, Beat the Curve that you wrote, you know, helping other people find their life's purpose and unleash their joy. The Chief Joy Officer. That sounds like a job that everyone would like to have. And it's actually possible. Everyone can be their own Chief Joy Officer.
Yes, and they should be, right.
Right, because that helps them to be their best self in the workplace.
Thank you. You are
All
correct, sir.
Well, Patrice, it's been a real pleasure, and aloha. Hope we see you very soon, and hui ho.
Aloha. Thank you so much.
Take care,
Take
Patrice.
care.
Aloha.
Make sure to subscribe to Hawaii Boss and follow us on social media at Hawaii Boss Podcast at the links in the description. We'll see you soon in the boss's office.